Welcome to my channel. Recently I got a request to talk a little bit about my very first coloring books, about my current opinion about them. Do I want to continue coloring them? Maybe I had changed my mind about some of the books. So let's go back to maybe 4 years ago, or maybe already 5 years ago. So it's a long story. And I already mentioned several times that my coloring journey started from this book by Easy Acho. I traveled to Paris, and in one of the souvenir shops I discovered this book. At that moment I was aware of such new hobby as adult coloring. I have heard about Johanna Basford, Mille Marotta. They were the only available artists who published their books, which books were available in Ukraine, but I wasn't very impressed. I thought that such coloring books, they are quite similar to the coloring books which I owned as a child. But when I discovered this book, it was a totally new discovery, totally new inspiration. So it was a revelation for me that we can have such coloring books, and that's for me indeed example of adult coloring. I realized that if I am not able to draw myself, then I can enjoy coloring, and I still treasure this book a lot. I still want to color it. Maybe the only problem is that I care a lot about having it as a whole, and it has not very good binding, so I don't want to risk pages falling apart. But I think that definitely I will be coloring it. I must confess that during this year and last year I don't color it because I immediately become very sad, because I want to travel, I want to go sightseeing, visiting beautiful cities, and you know that now it's still impossible. So I simply don't touch this book now, because I don't want to become sad and to be very disappointed with the current state of traveling, with current state of tourism. And I think that when everything will improve, then I will go back to this book. Next, I returned to Ukraine and I started to search for available coloring books. And my next purchases were books which I found in the video by Peter Hewitt. I watched Peter's video about Inktense pencils, and she used Magical City book. I was very happy to discover that I can purchase this book in my own language and in good quality, so Magical City was my book number 2. You know that in this book I already colored a lot. This book helped me to start my YouTube channel, and I will be forever grateful. I really enjoyed coloring in this book. For now, I colored almost all countries, famous cities, and the only pictures which I hadn't touched yet, they are like roofs or stairs or something like arch, which are less inspiring for me comparing to the real cities. So that's why I stopped to color in this book. Definitely I think that some of the pictures I will color. This spread is not bad, and some other pictures I still want to do. But in order to be able to finish the whole book, I need to invent something for such spreads. It's Japan, it's Tokyo, and I don't think that I have enough patience or enough creativity to color such picture. I think that it's not the best example of Lizzie Mary Cullen's work, and it really prevents me from finishing the whole book. So I think that maybe some of the pictures I will be doing when I feel that I miss coloring with Derwent Inktense, but I have other books by Lizzie Mary Cullen, and unfortunately when I want to color something by Lizzie, I much more often select Magical Journey or Magical Christmas, which for now are more interesting for me. Next, I decided that I will try to color Johanna Basford, and again I purchased Ukrainian editions. In Magical Enchanted Forest, I colored several pages, and indeed it helped me to get basic knowledge of layering, of blending. It helped me to realize what I treasure in pencils, that I prefer softer pencils, that my Derwent Color Soft, they definitely lack green colors, and that I enjoy coloring leaves and plants, so I need bigger range of greens. So it helped me with many aspects. I tested here soft pastel. I tested here how to color with felt tip pens, and I realized that I prefer to color with regular pencils. So it has a lot of good memories, but I definitely won't be coloring anything in forest or in the ocean. I think that it's mostly because I have so many beautiful books, and you know that I tend to color more realistic pictures, more complicated pictures. I am not a big fan of ornaments or coloring 200 leaves in the same shape. It's a little bit boring for me, so I treasure these books as my beginning, but I definitely won't be coloring them. The same thing goes to Mille Marotta. Mille Marotta isn't my style of the book. I saw a couple of examples on Instagram from Betty Hung, and she creates beautiful pictures from Mille Marotta's book, but she covers a lot of ornaments, and she turned animals or birds into more realistic pictures. And I also tend to color more realistic animals. I don't think that now I have enough patience to color all these leaves, all these ornaments, all these repeating elements. So totally not the book for me. If now I have beautiful book by Kirby Rosanes with realistic animals, I have book by Selina Fenech with Australian animals, and of course that style is much closer to my taste, so I won't be coloring Mille Marotta, definitely. Next, I purchased a couple of books from Russian authors, Russian artists, and by Russian publishers. Both books were printed in really very good quality on a very good paper. The first one is The Wind Carries Flowers Away by Olga Goloveshkina. Here, for the first time, I tested my Derwent Inktense pencils when I purchased them, not in Magical City, but here for more realistic coloring, like this one for corals, for fishes. Here for the first time I tested acrylic for the backgrounds, so it book also has a lot of good memories, but it's the same problem as with Mille Marotta. Now I don't think that I want to color all these repeating elements, lines. It's not the style of book which I prefer. You know that I don't like mandalas, repeating elements, patterns, pictures which have more realistic elements. Maybe let me show you some examples. At least here we have like fish and bird. Maybe I could color one day, and again transforming all this ornament into feathers by covering them by paint. But here the problem is that I have limited amount of time, and if I need to choose between struggling, inventing something for these pictures and enjoying coloring Kirby Rosanes, of course I will select Fragile World by Kirby. With Manic Botanic it's totally different thing. I do love this book. Fortunately, I have a Russian edition printed on a very good thick paper. And from the very beginning I decided that I will be coloring it with alcohol-based markers and with small details small accents made with pencils. And I did several pictures here. I still think that the style of Irina Vinnik, the artist, it's amazing and quite unique. But my problem was that I had a very limited amount of alcohol-based markers. And I had that problem for 3 years. Only for this Christmas I purchased a big set of alcohol-based markers, so it's a good reminder that I need to have this book back and to continue coloring in it. Now when I look at this page, I really want to color it. Maybe not the wolves, but these berries, various berries. I'm dying from desire to do such things. So this book, it's a good reminder that I have now a big set of alcohol-based markers, and this book will be very helpful. So this one I definitely want to color. So thanks for this request. Thanks for the prompt to take this book from the shelf. I definitely will put it somewhere near my working table. And the last two books which I purchased in the offline Ukrainian bookstores, it's Game of Thrones and Sherlock. Game of Thrones is one of the books which is closest to the finish. I have a lot of finished pictures here, and I love this book because it's my journey from the very beginning, from the first works, to the much more advanced level. This book helped me to realize that I can color with watercolors, that it's possible, and I'm not that bad at coloring with watercolors and then working on details with pencils. And I love my works here. It's really good that recently I got a request to do a couple of pictures here, so this book you definitely will see in my next videos. Sherlock, of course I purchased it because I'm a huge fan of the TV series. I love it's very original TV series. Some people love it, some people hate it. When I saw this book, I purchased it, and probably it was like my fourth or fifth book, so I wasn't very experienced at being able to say something about paper quality and about line art quality. Unfortunately, paper here can't work with water-based mediums, and you see that here we have big spreads. So until I got acrylic or gouache, I wasn't able to color it at all. And the bigger problem is that they created this line art from the TV pictures, so they simply transformed color pictures from the movie into line art, and that's why we have these ugly lines on the faces, on the clothes, which I think that they thought that these lines they will help us to show where can be shadows, where have to be highlights, but for me it's absolutely terrible. And when I got this book, I had no idea how it's possible to cover these stains, these lines on all the faces. Let me show you the worst examples, like this one. It's terrible. Now I think that maybe it's finally time to start doing at least to do one attempt to color something here, because I love compositions, and now I own much more opaque media like gouache, like acrylic paint, or opaque pencils which will be able to mask some of the black lines. And of course for the beginner it was too complicated, so I was afraid to color in it. I started just one page. It was terrible because of the paper, and I completely abandoned it. Maybe now it's finally time to start coloring something, but I need to be in more active coloring mood. Now when we still have very hot weather, I don't think that I feel very creative, and I still prefer more comfortable books. But maybe in September, when I will be again active, then maybe Sherlock will have its chance. Now it was the moment when I finally discovered possibility to order from book depository to Ukraine, and I started to purchase books by foreign editions. And of course my first purchase, it was Magical Journey. I still consider it as a best book by Lizzie Mary Cullen. I colored a lot on this book. I'm glad that I made a break, because at some moment I started to realize that many of my pictures, they have similar colors used for the architecture, for the background, for the sky. And after some break, I think that I am ready to return to it. Definitely I will be coloring it, and I love it as much as the first day when I got this book. Next, I purchased my first book by Kerber Razanes, and for a long time it was my one and only. Only recently I purchased Fragile World and World Within Words. I don't have any other books by Razanes. I loved this one, and I did a lot of pictures, a lot for me. I enjoyed them. On some of the pictures it was a little bit frustrating with too many doodles. I'm not a big fan of doodles, and for some of them it was too much. I also don't appreciate things where I need to draw something by myself. But still, it has some nice pictures, and maybe I will return to it. I think that I stopped coloring it because it was everywhere. Everyone colored it, and many pictures, many spreads I colored with my eyes. I was already satisfied with watching beautiful pictures by other people, so I was too lazy to start doing something by myself. Now it's considerably less popular, so finally I can return to it without being afraid that I will copy some others' work. Next, I have books which I again love as much as at the day when I got them. I am totally in love with this Escape series by Good Wives and Warriors. Both books are by Good Wives and Warriors. I love their style, but this series is perfect, and I am glad that three of my books, Escape to Christmas, Escape to Oz, and Shakespeare, they were first edition, where paper is really very good for watercolors. Many of my works here were made with watercolors, and that's how I will continue to color here. So it's still in my top 20 probably list of my favorite books. I appreciate that it has small size, so I can color quickly, but a lot of details, and you know that I prefer very detailed pictures. And watercolors, ink tents, they all behave here on this first edition paper perfectly. This spread I did with watercolors, and of course you will see more works from this book. Next, I have this Exotischer Urwald, and for a long time it was my favorite book about animals, because style of Good Wives and Warriors, it's really good. I love it, even with more mandala style, or style which is a little bit similar to Mille Marotta. It's not so boring because it has bigger variety of elements. But most of all, I appreciate spreads where we have bigger variety of realistic animals, like this one or this one. My only problem with this book is that when we have spreads dedicated to some regions like Amazon, Brazil, and we have a lot of interesting animals around, but we don't have names of them. You know that I love realistic coloring, so I want to go and to search information about these particular frogs, these interesting fishes traditional for this region, but we don't have names. If this book has names of plants and animals, it would be absolutely perfect. I remember that when I did this spread from about Japan, I searched a lot of websites trying to find similar botanical elements, trying to find information about this particular type of monkeys. It was interesting, but now when I have book by Razanes, again Fragile World. When I have Australian Animals by Selina Fenwick, sometimes I tend to color in those books more. But still I love it, I think that it's beautiful and I will be coloring it. And finally, in my first purchases were books by Hannah Carson and Maria Trolle. They were extremely popular on YouTube. I was waited like crazy. When will they arrive from Book Depository? I saw many beautiful videos, many beautiful pictures from this book, and I wanted them. Then, when I started to purchase later books by Hannah Carson, and I think that Hannah Carson, she made tremendous progress from her first book to her last books. Of course, I think that her last books are 100 times more interesting and more beautiful comparing to her first books. It's good for Hannah, it's good for us, but when I have limited amount of time and when I need to select, do I want to color in Daydreams or do I want to color in Midnight Masquerade, for example? Of course, my choice will be to color in her later books. They are much more for my taste. More interesting characters, more interesting compositions. So unfortunately this book is slightly abandoned and I color it only if I got specific request from my patrons, from my followers. If they want something from this book, then of course if I can color, I will try to color it if I have some coloring ideas. And I purchased Maria Trolle. I was intrigued because some of the pictures were on black paper. For me as a beginner it was quite unusual, quite interesting, but when I got the book I started to realize that Maria Trolle's style is not for me. From the first pictures I realized that it's difficult for me to color these repeating elements, that I'm not a huge fan of compositions, and it was my one and only purchased book by Maria Trolle. My next two books, Twilight Garden and Botanicum, I got from the publisher to represent these books, and I don't plan to extend my collection of Maria Trolle's books because I still have difficulties with her books. I never know how to do backgrounds. I never know how to convert her botanical elements into more realistic. I'm not a big fan of her animals or people. So definitely not my favorite book. And Twilight Garden is the least popular among my three books by Maria. If I need to color something in Maria, then I prefer Botanicum, which is easier for me to color. So if I have a request to do something here, yeah, I try to do it, but from my own desire I never will be touching this book. I think that it's not a bad result, especially because I was very unexperienced at that moment, and I was so happy that I was able to order something from foreign publishers, to order the same books which were popular on YouTube, that I purchased a lot. And only after that I started to realize more about my own tastes, about my preferences in pencils, in paper. So it's good that I still love many of my first books, and maybe not very frequently, but many of them I plan to color. It's a big problem when you have a lot of books like I have in my collection. And of course, when you got new book, you want to color this newest book. Especially now when I add not so many books to my collection, I try to be more realistic, that I don't have enough time for all my books, and I tend to do at least one page. So all my old books, yeah, they feel slightly abandoned, but I'm grateful that I got this request. Definitely Manic Botanic I will be keeping somewhere closer and to do something there with my alcohol-based markers. And Game of Thrones, it definitely deserves to be finished one day. And of course Shakespeare, it's also on my top list. So only books by Marotta and books by Basford, they will be abandoned. I don't feel any inspiration in coloring them. The rest, I think that one day you will see them again. Thank you for listening, and I will see you very soon in my next videos.